Fed and state to order. And the first item on the agenda is, do we have introduction of bills? Is anyone introducing any bills this morning? Seeing none. First item on our agenda is House Bill 2005, which is excluding hot water supply boilers that have a nominal water capacity not to exceed 120 gallons from the Provisional Boiler Safety Act. And we have a staff briefing. Before we get started, we do have a lot of conferees this morning, so we're going to ask you keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes maximum. So we'll go from there. Okay, Jason, could you give us a briefing on House Bill 2005? Jason? Jason, are you online? Well, we will, in your packet, you do have the memorandum from the revisers on the bill. And it basically says, under the Kansas Boiler Safety Act, the fire marshal oversees the inspection of the installation of the repairs on the boilers and that are subject to the act, and certain hot water supply boilers or home or water heaters are not subject to the act. And basically that's what this is all about. It says the language for the exception can be seen on page 1 of the bill. Under current law, hot water supply boilers that meet other conditions have a normal water capacity that exceeds 85 gallons will be subject to the requirements of the act. Anything under 85 would not be subject to the act, basically. So are there any questions on this? There were no proponents and there was no opponents and there was no neutrals. So are there any? Yes, Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know if the fire marshal is the one that brought this bill?
No, the fire marshal is not the one that brought the bill.
Are they okay with it?
Brought by a House member.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator Cadoux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it says there's an amendment in here that's going to strike the 85 gallons. Or what are we changing it to and why?
Yes, it's from 85 and increasing it up to 120. Are there any other questions on the bill? If not, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 2005. Okay. You're online, Jason, is that right?
Yes, my apologies, Mr. Chairman. Had technical audio difficulties there for that last bill.
Okay, if you don't mind, we're going to go forward with this. I read your brief and there was no other questions but one, so
It was a very simple bill, so I'm sure you handled it just fine.
Okay, thank you. We're going to do something a little different here because we do have 2 House members that are going to testify. We're going to move to House Bill 2008 and get the 2 House members that want to testify on that bill so they get to the business on the floor. And so we will, at this time, open the hearing on House Bill 2008, providing for the Attorney General to coordinate the training for law enforcement agencies on the missing and murderous indigenous people. And so, Jason, could you give us a staff briefing on that, please?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, House Bill 2008 is also a very short, relatively simple bill. It simply authorizes the Attorney General to coordinate training with Native American Indian tribes and other law enforcement and appropriate state agencies such as the KBI and the Law Enforcement Training Center to do training regarding the investigations into missing and murdered Indigenous persons by those agencies throughout Kansas. The bill would go into effect on July 1st of this year.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Jason? Yes, Senator Faust Cadoux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, is this legislation that we heard last year brought forward by Representative Victors and then COVID stalled, or?
It is familiar legislation in terms of doing investigations on missing and murdered Indigenous peoples in Kansas. I'm not sure if this precise language was introduced last year, but I can certainly take a look.
Thank you. I think I'll ask the representative who's here the question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there any further questions? Thank you, Jason. Our first proponent is Representative Ponko Victors. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for letting us go first. I don't want the Highway Patrol coming looking for me. Yes, House Bill 2008, this is a simple bill, but it's a step in the right direction. This is the same language, the same bill that was introduced last year, and it passed your committee with full support. Unfortunately, due to COVID, it died on the Senate. It didn't make it to the Senate floor. This year, it passed the House with full support, and there was no opponents on the House side. And so, like I said, it's a simple bill, and what it would do is it would, like Jason had said, it would coordinate trainings between the Kansas tribes, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the Kansas Law Enforcement, and other state agencies regarding missing and murdered Indigenous persons in Kansas. And let me tell you why this is so important to our community. Native American women are murdered at more than 10 times the national average. Native American women are missing and murdered at high rates across the country. In 2019, lawmakers in 14 states introduced 30 measures about the underreporting and data collection problems that demonstrate the difficulty in solving the murder cases of missing and Indigenous women. Like I said, this bill was passed out of your committee last year, and it's so important. And I was thankful to have the strong support of former Chairman Estes. He was a big supporter of this bill and was trying to get it to the governor's desk, but it didn't make it. At the end of the day, our women and girls are still missing, and we don't have all the answers of why, and we don't even know how many. I have relatives and friends who have been murdered and are still missing because of this national unspoken crisis. And so that, Mr. Chairman, that is why I'm here today to ask your support to pass House Bill 2008.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Leader, and welcome to committee. I know I've seen you before.
Thank you.
Your statistic is really sad, and I don't know, was not aware of that. Do you have any reason or why there's such a high rate of murder with Indigenous groups?
Well, there's a lot of factors that can play into it, but until we have all this data collected, then we can really pinpoint where the real issues are. And I just know that it's still happening. One of the tribal leaders had talked to me recently about how one of their young women was missing, and they found her here in Topeka. in a hotel. So we don't know what it's related to, but we do know we're a targeted race. As old as I am, 39 years old, I still have to check in with my family when I get to point A to point B because I'm always on that road, highway, because they're always scared of me because in our community, we know that this is happening.
Senator Falscadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Ponkowy Victors. I support this legislation very much. A question for you. So within the Attorney General's office, to you, how does that training look?
Well, I reached out to the attorney, this is their language, the Attorney General came up with. I reached out to them first, and I was gonna put it under their human trafficking section, but they thought this would be better if it was in a new section. And I'm leaving that training open to them, and like I said, in the bill, they're gonna coordinate with the tribes. So I'm just trying to get this going.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming today. We
Thank you.
appreciate that. The next proponent, Representative Hazelwood. Welcome. Welcome again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Representative Christina Hazwood. I'm from District 10. Missing and murdered Indigenous peoples are disproportionately impacted by this public health crisis. It is a movement that brings action and awareness to the higher rates of abduction, murder, violence, and human trafficked Indigenous peoples. According to 2018, the National Vital Statistics System's homicide was the 6th leading cause of death in American Indian Alaska Native females aged 1 through 44 years old. A resource I've used multiple times in my public health academic and career is ks.gov. It's an online database public system by the National Institute of Justice where you can search and create a file for a missing loved one. Today, there are currently a reported 696 missing Indigenous peoples in the United States that I found, but in Kansas, it has pinpointed, I believe 3, but I was corrected by KBI to have that there's currently 5 currently missing Indigenous peoples in the state of Kansas. In the summer of 2019, I interned for a national nonprofit in Washington, D.C. called the National Council of Urban Indian Health, which I got to investigate and create research papers for missing more Indigenous peoples in the urban Native setting, such as my district where I was born and raised, District 10, which has Haskell Nations University and a large urban Native population. I was able to educate and bring awareness to many congressional members, and now I'm doing so here in the Kansas Legislature. There are many reasons and areas of this issue that need to be addressed in the missing more Indigenous peoples, such as education, awareness, and data and visibility. Though I believe HB 2008 is a first step. And thank you so much for this opportunity, your time to testify. And I ask for your support in the pass of HB 2008. I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Peterson.
Thank you very much for appearing today. I noticed in your testimony that it's the 3rd leading cause of death for males, so this is issues with males and females.
That's correct. And the Indigenous peoples that are missing in Kansas that I found, most of them were males.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Falscadeau.
Thank you, Representative. So I think Representative Ponkowy Victor gave a number of how many in Kansas. Do you know where at in Kansas, or is that also in your district? Thank you.
Of these missing Indigenous peoples. So what I found on this public access, and mind you that what KBI has is public or private access. So I found that corrected statistics in when I was testifying on the House side, which I believe their database isn't accessible to the public. Those individuals that were missing that I found on my end were more on the western side of Kansas. So, you know, I think that's why with data and visibility, we really don't know. And, you know, you'll hear from other conferees, other statistics that are national, that, you know, this is really why I think HB 2008 is a good step forward into addressing this data and visibility.
Thank you. Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Hazwood, could you just explain why this is needed, why it cannot be accomplished right now until this bill is passed? Could you explain that to the committee, please?
Thank you so much for that question. I believe this, a lot of other states have done this first step, and Kansas hasn't taken that first step. And I think this would be a really great opportunity to have this coordination with the Attorney General and our state law enforcement. I believe this type of legislation will help move that forward in the coordination that we all need, because missing our Indigenous peoples, we know there's so many levels of government when working with a tribal sovereign nation that I think this would be a great piece to the solution of this puzzle.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate that. Next proponent is Carol Cadoux Blackwood, a member of the Kickapoo tribe. Carol, welcome.
Hey, good morning. Bonjour, manokishko paras nadajanukas. Good morning. My name is Carol Cadoux Blackwood, and well, first of all, I'd like to thank Chairman Larry Allen for giving us this great Larry Alley for this opportunity. I'm an enrolled member of the Kickapoo tribe in Kansas, and I am affiliated with the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation in Kansas. I'm also a longtime domestic violence and sexual assault advocate. I appreciate the opportunity to present written testimony in support of House Bill 2008. This bill mirrors Public Law 116-165, or Savannah's Act. Savannah's Act was signed into law by President Donald Trump on October 10th of 2020. House Bill 2008 would further reinforce Savannah's Act, in which both pieces of legislation require law enforcement to review, revise, and develop law enforcement and justice protocols to address missing or murdered Native Americans. I live off the Kickapoo Indian Reservation, like so many of our greater majority Indian people who live off reservation in urban America. Our United States citizenship does not end at the Indian Reservation border, nor does the unique status of government obligations to our Indian people in the United States terminate at the Indian Reservation border. Our Indian people are guaranteed full United States constitutional rights as all other citizens, and we accept the responsibility of this citizenship. We all treasure our constitutional rights, whether we are from Horton, Marietta, Lawrence, or Winfield, Kansas. These full guaranteed constitutional rights should be at the centerpiece of the debate and this decision-making in the consideration for passage of House Bill 2008. The significant numbers of disappearance and deaths of our Native American people have placed our communities in a crisis of sexual and criminal victimization. Our Indian people are the most vulnerable in America's society. The state of Kansas must act urgently and with strong resolve to prevent this ever-growing crime against humanity. Indian people are human beings with a zeal for life as any other citizen. Indigenous people come from throughout the United States to my hometown and alma mater, Haskell Indian Nations Universities, to seek higher education, and as Kansans, we wish them to know we regard our homeland as their own. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their communities, including urban areas. It is time for the state of Kansas to take strong action to stop this epidemic of violence and seek justice for those who have been impacted. Thank you, miigwech.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Yes.
Yes.
Senator Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, and thank you for being here. Welcome. You said that the 2008 mirrors what's already federal law.
Public law, yes.
So we're just wanting to catch up and be in sync with the federal law then with
Right,
this.
and I've said Donald Trump signed this into federal law on October 10th of last year.
Right.
It's almost identical to this legislation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Senator Faust-Cadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No question. I just wanted to commend you, and I'm proud to see you here today, and a united Kansas of addressing the issues of all people. Thank you so much.
Miigwech.
Thank you very much. The next proponent would be Georgia Cadoux Blackwood. Georgia, welcome.
Bonjour, minogishko kwe, athamitha kwa nadaja nukas. Good morning, Honorable Larry Allen, members of the Federal and State Affairs Committee. My name is Georgia Blackwood, and I am a lifelong resident of Lawrence, Kansas. I'm an enrolled member of the Kickapoo tribe in Kansas and affiliated with the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation in Kansas. I appreciate the opportunity to present written testimony in support of House Bill 2008. Indigenous women and girls face disproportionately high rates of violence in the United States. Experts estimate Native American women face a murder rate of 10 times higher than the national average. with 84 experiencing some form of violence in their lifetime. This is according to the research from the National Institute of Justice, the research arm of the Department of Justice. These are not just numbers. These are people. These are mothers. These are sisters. These are daughters. These are aunts. These are grandmothers. I am here today, again, to ask you to act and vote in favor of House Bill 2008. The state of Kansas must enforce Public Law 116-165, or Savannah's Act, by coordinating training for law enforcement agencies on missing and murdered Indigenous people. I ask you that you address this crisis with urgency. This is an issue that affects me personally. I have many female family members that I worry about constantly, like my mother and my sister. This requires all hands on deck. There are 600 federally recognized Indian tribes in the United States and approximately 326 Indian reservations. Over 1 million Native American residents live on or near reservation lands. Victims' families already are heartbroken and have to deal with all this trauma, and then they have to face a patchwork of tribal, state, and federal law enforcement. And federal agencies, sometimes victims' families are dismissed as chronic runaways instead. They just dismiss their cases. This issue has plagued our communities since 1492, when Europeans would kidnap our women and send us European countries. I live in a community where our Indigenous people have been murdered or missing. It is time we look for solutions and work together to heal and serve justice for Indigenous people and their families. Now is the time you show the world how sovereign nations can work together immediately. Please, show that you care. Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you. Any questions? None. Thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate it. The next is Haley Birdtail. And if we do have your written testimony, we appreciate that. If you could kind of summarize what you're saying, that would be fine. So thank you very much. Haley, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Dear Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak with you all today. My name is Haley Birdtail. I come from the Anani, Nakota, and Niwa nations. My namesakes are Wasiyak and Wapato. I am here today in favor of the HB 2008 bill, which addresses the disproportionate rates of abduction, murder, violence, and human trafficking of Indigenous peoples. Missing and murdered Indigenous peoples is a public health crisis that has been sweeping our nation as the rates are continuing to climb and plague our Indigenous communities. Settler colonials used rape and violence as a tool to colonize the New World, and the physical violence continued far after the early days of settlement and well into the establishment of the United States. Nearly 529 years later, the extreme violence has continued to impact Indigenous women. 61% of American Indian and Alaska Native women have been assaulted in their lifetimes, compared to the 51% of white women. The urgency of interventions, protection, legislation, and representation that Indigenous people need is not only a necessity, but a basic human right. While this is a national emergency, we can begin the healing right here in the state of Kansas. With the passing of the HB 2008 bill, I believe it is an opportunity to bring communities back together and begin the restoration of trust. I would like to thank each and every one of you today for allowing me to speak regarding the urgent attention of the MMIP crisis. Thank you for this opportunity, and any questions?
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For being here. The next conferee is Sarah Deer, and she is remote, I believe.
Hi, can you all hear me?
We can.
Great, thank you. I'd like to express my deep appreciation for the opportunity to testify before this committee regarding House Bill 2008, sponsored by Representatives Victors and Haswood. I'm a citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation of Oklahoma, and I currently hold the position of Distinguished Professor at the University of Kansas and serve as the Chief Justice of the Prairie Island Indian Community Court of Appeals. Today, I am testifying in my personal capacity as a private resident of Kansas. I have over 25 years of experience working on issues pertaining to violence against Native people. I was raised in Wichita, Kansas, and my late grandfather served 6 terms in the Kansas House in the 1950s, representing Augusta. This is my first opportunity to testify for the Kansas Legislature. I know he would be proud. I strongly support this bill as a crucial first step in addressing missing and murdered Indigenous people in Kansas and elsewhere. I have previously testified on this issue at the United States House Judiciary Committee and the United States House Committee on Natural Resources, leading to the bills that President Trump signed about a year ago. This is not a new problem and is not limited to the state of Kansas, but the bill is an opportunity to address this crisis as many other states have done in the past 3 years. It's a first step and an opportunity for the Kansas Attorney General to work with tribal nations in Kansas. We have to accept that there will be no quick fix to this problem. The crisis has been several hundred years in the making and will require sustained, multi-year, multifaceted efforts to understand the problem. Because tribal nations, I'm almost done, I know we're rushing. Because tribal nations lack criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians, legal savvy predators are attracted to Indian lands because there is less likelihood of being caught and prosecuted. This has allowed some predators to wreak havoc for generations. This bill will help law enforcement agencies be better prepared for reports pertaining to missing and murdered Indigenous people. There are several national organizations that provide training on these issues and could help develop a Kansas-specific curriculum. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. I'm hopeful that the new attention on a very old problem will finally begin to stem this crisis. Please support the families to find their loved ones and bring them home. Mado, thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, are there questions? I do have one, Sarah. Who was your grandfather?
Yeah. Isaac Kelso Deer.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next conferee for proponents is Jordan Gunville. Jordan, welcome to committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for your time and this opportunity to testify today in support of HB 2008. My name is Jordan Gunville, and I'm an enrolled member of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. I am an Indigenous health policy and health equity researcher and advocate. I have been doing research in tribal communities in Kansas and throughout the United States for the past 13 years. Indigenous communities are disproportionately affected by social determinants of health, especially violence. Murder and disappearance of Indigenous women is occurring at tragic rates throughout the United States, both within reservation and urban communities. This public health and health policy crisis brings forth the importance of awareness and adequate training needed to address the current epidemic that faces our communities. A study from the National Institute of Justice has found that more than 4 in 5 American Indian and Alaska Native adults have experienced some form of violence in their lifetime. This finding is linked to victimization rates that are reported 1.2 times higher for Native women when compared to other groups or populations. In addition, according to the 2018 National Congress for American Indian report, American Indian women are murdered at more than 10 times the national average. It is important that the data mentioned does not, it is important to note that the data mentioned does not reflect the whole story due to the lack of reporting and misclassification of data at the tribal, state, and federal levels, as well as these tribal sovereignty policies and our state and federal policies. It is more likely that these numbers of missing murdered Indigenous women are much higher. There are many tribal nations and territories that are home to Kansas, as well as a federally operated tribal university, Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas. Haskell Indian Nations University's educational institution brings hundreds of Indigenous students from all over the United States, many of which become permanent residents of Kansas. House Bill 2008 is instrumental in providing preventative measures to educate and equip law enforcement personnel for the safety and well-being to the Indigenous people of Kansas. It's also a unique opportunity for us to create databases which can be shared at the state, tribal, and federal levels. Thank you for this historical opportunity to speak on behalf of the missing, murdered Indigenous women. I ask the committee to support and pass HB 2008. I stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Next conferee is River Gunville. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Hamadakasi. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today in support of House Bill 2008 regarding coordination of training on missing and murdered Indigenous peoples for law enforcement agencies throughout Kansas. My name is River Gunville. I am a research scientist for the Institute for Indigenous Studies at Lehigh University. I'm a Minikoji Lakota woman from the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Reservation located in South Dakota. I grew up on the reservation, and I moved to Kansas in 2018 after completing my undergraduate degree, and I've been a Kansas resident ever since. Growing up on the reservation and working with various tribes in the state of Kansas and across the country, I understand through my experience as a Native woman, researcher, and community member the impacts of violence against American Indians. According to the Urban Indian Health Institute, Indigenous people go missing or are murdered at a higher rate than any other ethnicity. American Indian women face particularly higher rates of violence. According to the 2018 National Congress of American Indians report, more than 4 out of 5, 84.3% of American Indians and Alaska Native women and girls will experience violence, including physical and sexual violence, at the hands of an intimate partner during their lives. According to the National Crime Information Center, over 5,700 American Indian and Alaska Native women and girls were reported missing in 2016 alone. However, only 116 were reported by the U.S. Department of Justice. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, murder is the third leading cause of death among American Indian and Alaska Native women. And these numbers are likely to be much higher for various reasons, such as underreporting, racial misclassification, and lack of law enforcement resources to investigate cases. The missing and murdered Indigenous women epidemic has devastating effects for Native people and communities throughout the United States. And the state of Kansas is home to 4 federally recognized tribes and the biggest tribal university in the nation, Haskell Indian Nation University, and all of which contribute to a substantial and strong presence of Indigenous people in the state of Kansas. To help protect the Native people in Kansas, it is imperative that HB 2008 is passed so that law enforcement agencies are able to receive accurate MMIP education and training as a necessary first step towards gaining awareness and addressing this issue. Thank you for allowing me the time and opportunity to testify today, and I urge the committee to support and pass HB 2008, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Plamiapi.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our next proponent is Lindsey Ford, and she is remote. Lindsey, are you online?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Lindsey Ford, and I am the staff attorney at the Kansas Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. We represent 26 domestic violence and sexual assault agencies across the state of Kansas. We're here today in support of House Bill 2008. Countless Indigenous people in Kansas have gone missing or been murdered. I say countless, not for the sake of hyperbole, but because these crimes have not been appropriately identified and tracked. The conversation about missing and murdered Indigenous people has been occurring in Indian country for years, but it has only recently begun to garner the important attention that it deserves on a national level. We have evidence and limited preliminary data, which I've included in my written testimony, that shows that these crimes are occurring at an alarming rate, but we do not currently have the appropriate infrastructure in place to understand exactly how frequently this is happening in our state. We do know that many of these crimes can be linked to domestic violence and sexual assault. We cannot begin to address this problem until we can fully understand it. And this bill is an important first step to addressing the safety and well-being of Kansas's Indigenous population. And for that, I thank you for this time today to address this important issue, and I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Lindsey. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Cadoux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Lindsey. So the data, the legislation that is passed in DC, would our state be able to utilize some of that data to help track those missing here in Kansas?
I believe we would. The issue with that, though, is most of that data is being tracked from a federal level. We're wanting to be able to track Kansas-specific data to know exactly how often the crimes are occurring here in Kansas. And for that, we would need our own data.
So, Mr. Chairman, then that would be why we need House Bill 2008 to be specific to our state then. Is that correct, Lindsey?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Is there any further questions? Thank you, Lindsey. We do have written support from Robert Jacobs, the Executive Officer of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the Attorney General, Derek Schmidt, Adian Graybill, a member of the Wyandotte Nation, and Ben Barnes, Chief of the Shawnee Tribe. So with that, is there any further questions? Yes, Senator Cadoux.
Not a question, just a couple brief comments. We sit in here and all these different testimonies and committee, and today my heart's just really moved by this testimony. And, sometimes we inadvertently focus on our own communities, and I'm just reminded, and I normally wouldn't even say this, but who is our neighbor, and am I not my brother's keeper? And I'm definite in support of this bill.
Thank you very much for that comment. With that, we're going to close the hearing on 2008, and Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After the testimony from everyone, we heard how urgent this bill is to get signed into law, and especially with the federal government having a federal bill similar to this. I make a motion that we move this out favorably or move it out onto consent calendar.
Do I have a second? Second. I got 3 seconds. They're all seconded that motion. Thank you. All in favor of the motion to bring this bill 2008 out favorably and place it on the consent calendar? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, ladies, for coming in today. We appreciate your testimony. Thank you. We'll close the hearing on 2008.
Thank you, Representative Regulars.
We'll open the hearing on House Bill 2264. And Jason, could you give us a staff briefing on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, House Bill 2264 is the bill that allows student athletes who are participating at colleges and universities in Kansas to receive compensation for the use of their name, image, likeness, and or athletic reputation. As you probably are currently aware, many association rules for members, like members of the NCAA, prohibit student athletes from receiving such compensation. But House Bill 2264 would authorize that receipt of compensation. Section 1 of the bill are the relevant definitions for key terms in the bill. I'll direct your attention to the post-secondary educational institution is a little bit broader than we typically define this term in statute, and that it also includes any college or university in Kansas and any not-for-profit corporation controlled by an educational institution for the sole purpose of operating the athletic program. So it's a bit broader than what we typically include. Also, the definition of athletic association includes any association or conference or other group or organization with authority over the operation of intercollegiate athletics. We're primarily talking about the NCAA here, but that would also include other conferences such as the MIAA as well. Section 2 of the bill allows student athletes to receive compensation for the use of their image, likeness, etc. It also prohibits any educational institution or any athletic association from prohibiting or imposing any penalty upon the school or the student athlete for receiving that compensation. And then it further clarifies that any grant and aid or stipend scholarship that the student is receiving is not to be considered compensation under the Act. And then Section 3 goes into professional representation and authorizes student athletes to seek and obtain professional representation, and that the athletic association cannot prevent a school from participating as a result of a student athlete on the team obtaining representation, and that professional representation must be provided by a appropriately licensed individual who complies with the statutes in Kansas for such activities. Then Section 4 deals with conflicts between students' contract with the post-secondary educational institution and their contract to receive compensation for their image, likeness, etc. The student athlete, by signing with the school, is deemed to have granted the school, the college or university, the right to use the student's name, image, likeness, and reputation for advertising and marketing, royalty-free and without compensation. And then there are provisions that the student can't sign another marketing agreement, another compensation agreement that conflicts with that grant of rights to the college or university. And the student should not enter into a contract providing compensation if the provision is in conflict with provision the contract entered into with the college or university, so you can't have conflicts between those. And the student and the university are to notify each other if there is a conflict or if the students enter into a contract for compensation. Section 5 says that this act only applies to those contracts executed after January 1st, 2022, which is the effective date of the bill. There is an exemption for certain colleges and universities. If the college or university is exempt from the Kansas Private and Out-of-State Post-Secondary Educational Institution Act, which is an act in which the Board of Regents provides some minimal oversight of certain private and corporations that conduct post-secondary courses in Kansas. If those institutions are exempt from that act and they want to be exempted from this, they can opt out of this act. And then any legal settlement arising under the act shall not permit noncompliance with the act. The bill goes into effect on January 1st, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions of Jason? Yes, Senator Dietrich.
Jason, so the student athlete that receives the compensation for the use of their image or whatever, is that coming to them in the form of, or for tax purposes, will it be a 1099? Are they going to be, it's going to be considered compensation, so they're going to have to pay taxes on it, correct?
Yes, under federal tax law, they would have to pay taxes on the compensation. It would be something of value that would pay to them. The form in which it comes to them is probably going to be dependent on the contractual relationship between the student athlete and the entity that is paying them for the use of their image, name, reputation, etc.
Can I ask another question? Was there ever discussion about a cap on how much that compensation might grow to in one calendar year?
I don't know if there were discussions on that. There are no limitations under 2264 as to how much compensation the student athlete could be provided.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Senator Cadoux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, so does the school get any of that compensation, or does that all go to the student?
No, this would be a two-party agreement between the student athlete and the entity that is using their name, likeness, reputation, paying the student for that. The college or university is a third party outside of that arrangement. Now, the student may have, its own contractual arrangement when it signs to participate, on the team. And as the bill contemplates, the school would have the rights to use the student's name or image, reputation for the school's own marketing purposes, such as, whatever advertising they do with the student's image on that. But that's solely an agreement between the student and the university.
Senator Reichman?
Thank you, Mr. Leader. You started to give some examples. I wish you could give me some examples how they could be compensated. The athlete would be like in a program, or how would that work? Thank you.
I believe the conferees who are scheduled to speak on this bill might be better in a better situation to provide some practical real-world examples of students receiving compensation. So I'm going to defer that question to them if you don't mind.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Jason. The first proponent is Mr. Kurt Watson, the interim director of University of Kansas, interim athletic director, excuse me. Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Alley and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Kurt Watson, and I'm currently serving as the interim director of athletics at the University of Kansas. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to address you this morning in support of House Bill 2264. While I'm new to this role at KU, I have quickly discovered how vital it is for the state of Kansas to pass Bill 2264. I know my predecessor and others that I greatly respect in this state have been preparing for over a year to ensure athletics programs in Kansas are not left out at a competitive disadvantage compared to other state laws on name, image, and likeness, more informally referred to as NIL. If there is no federal law enacted, while we still fully support legislation that permits all NCAA programs to operate within the same rules regarding name, image, and likeness, we simply cannot rely on that any longer, as the days and weeks have quickly caught up to us. As of today, at least 35 states have introduced, passed legislation, or have bills pending on this subject matter, including states with Power 5 conference schools, the highest level of Division I athletics. Each state bordering Kansas already has similar NIL bills pending, and we respectfully request that you pass House Bill 2264. This bill will permit each Kansas college or university competing across all three NCAA divisions with the opportunity to remain competitive in recruiting and in competition. And for KU, that means that each of our 18 sports would not be put at a distinct disadvantage. Recruiting battles occur every day within each of our sports programs, and we pride ourselves on detailing the benefits of playing for KU and wearing Kansas on your uniform. We look at that as an honor being a member of our university, but more importantly, a member for the state. If a future collegiate student athlete can monetize from their NIL in another state and not Kansas, we will quickly be eliminated from that student athlete's prospective school list, which will then allow that student athlete to potentially compete directly against us at other schools in the Big 12 and around the country. Ultimately, our competitors will benefit greatly while we will suffer dramatically. If the NCAA cannot garner enough support for national legislation, or if the U.S. Congress elects not to act, or is unable to do so in time to preclude the individual state bills from going into effect, then the state of Kansas must be prepared with this bill. We anticipate a lapse in time between the effective dates of the NCAA's request for federal legislation and when individual state laws go into effect this summer. As someone currently serving in an interim role and knowing the value it can serve, HB 2264 can do the same and will ensure colleges and universities within our state are not placed at a disadvantage in this interim period. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today, and I will do my best to answer any questions that you have at the appropriate time, and have brought members of our athletic department to assist with those questions as well, both not here and in person. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Our first question, Senator Longbottom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Watson, thank you for being here today. I'm the proud father of two collegiate volleyball players. They're both since retired. Coach Bouchard didn't think they were Big 12 volleyball players, and quite honestly, he was right. But they enjoyed their opportunity to play. Some of the NCAA rules I quite honestly find a little bit ridiculous. As an example, my daughter, who was a scholarship athlete, but even non-scholarship athletes, if they're on a team, they are not able to, as my daughter was not able to give volleyball lessons to young volleyball players. A swimmer is not allowed to give swim lessons. A tennis players can't give tennis lessons. So would this bill fix that?
Absolutely, and I think those are great examples, because so many times when we talk about this, we're talking about people getting in line with major corporations and making lots of money, and that's really not what this bill is about, although it could be. I think your example is a perfect one. This would allow young people in our programs to help other people become better athletes, and I think that's a critical component of this bill. Today, they have no opportunity for that, and I think this would be a fantastic opportunity for our student athletes.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Senator Cluse.
Yes, I was just curious. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How long have some of the other states been doing this? Is this recent, or a year, 2 years, or?
Well, let me refer to our corporate counsel, and she can help you with that question.
Mr. Chair, Megan Wallawender. I'm Senior Associate General Counsel at the University of Kansas and the Associate Athletic Director for Legal Affairs. The answer to your question is that Florida is actually going to be the first state that becomes effective, and it becomes effective July 1. Much like a lot of the legislation this committee has been working, we brought this forward last year with COVID. It similarly died on the floor. So it's been within the last 18 months. We're seeing a lot of legislation, but we're seeing a ton of movement in this area, which is why we're here today.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And I understand that Chris Fleet was going to be here, but he's has another, he's staying at home today, so we appreciate that. Huh? Yes, I know, but he was just to answer any questions, so thank you very much. The next proponent is Gene Taylor, Director of Athletics at K-State, and he is remote. So Gene, are you online?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Morning, Chairman Alley and members of the Senate Federal and State Affairs Committee. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify this morning. I'm sorry I could not be there in person. I appreciate Mr. Watson and his staff being able to be there. I've been in this business for 36 years, and I've seen the in-state change in many ways and change policy many times. I would tell you in my time as an athletic director and my time in this business, this is the one of the most pivotal times I've ever witnessed. And we need to make sure we get this right. It's too critical for the business of college athletics, no matter what division, that we do everything we can to get this right. The college athletes today have a bigger stage now than they've ever had before. With that comes new demands, which we must consider. And NIL is one of those newest demands. It's a topic for us to get navigate, as we must make certain and well-regulated with the best interest of our student athletes in mind and ensuring we protect the collegiate model, which we have today. And there is no parallel to the collegiate model. We're not the NFL, we're not the NBA, we're not Major League Baseball. We are an amateur sport business that has grown to a significant business that these young men and women participate in. We are very highly competitive. And as Mr. Watson talked about, recruitment is one of our main issues. These young men and women have a choice of where they can go and play their athletic career. They're not drafted like the professional leagues. And it's really important that we make sure we protect the integrity of the recruiting process by allowing each state, if we don't get federal help, where it's a national bill that would help us along with the NCAA, that as a state, we have the opportunity to compete with the other states around us. You know, today's student athletes have benefits that did not exist 5 or 6 years ago. They've enjoyed tremendous investment in athletic facilities on our campuses and campuses across the country. The opportunity to train and compete in these facilities are tremendous for our men and women. We've made investments in other areas, including academic facilities, academic support systems, medical care, which includes transitional care for medical expenses that happen beyond their college career and at departure from school, which can be reimbursed. We provide unlimited meals and snacks. You know, one of the best decisions we made was to provide a full cost of attendance for tuition fees, in addition to tuition fees, room and board, and books. The change is provided for trips home, entertainment, incidental living expenses, and amounts between $3,000 to $6,000 per student per year, depending on the institution. I mentioned the academic opportunities. I had 2 student athletes in my office yesterday. Both were seniors. One's going to graduate from Kansas State with her master's degree, and one's going to graduate from Kansas State with their second undergraduate degree. So these young men and women have an opportunity to leave here with multiple degrees, if possible, because of the investment that we have made in our current student athletes. At Kansas State, for example, when you consider a full scholarship student athlete, which is in-state tuition and covers tuition fees, room, board, books, and cost of attendance, and you had other areas like strength and conditioning, academic tutoring, advising, sports medicine, equipment and apparel, food and nutrition, and travel, that value for an in-state student athlete's full scholarship is $75,000 a year. For an out-of-state student, that ranges about $91,000 for K-State. We do not need to lose sight of the benefits and great experiences our student athlete are receiving. Our number one priority is to make sure our athletes get an education, build a better future, and provide as many opportunities to increase those benefits. This would be possible with the legislation such as House Bill 2264, and be able to protect the collegiate model. Will collegiate athletics survive the passage of this legislation by states regarding other athletes' ability to receive compensation? More than likely, the balance of competition will not be dramatically altered. There have always been advantages that institutions have that there will always be advantages that other institutions have. We have that right now. Young men and women choose to go to their institution based on facilities, based on the coaching staffs. So we're not always going to win the recruiting battle, but if we don't have a bill in this state, we're definitely going to be disadvantaged, as Mr. Watson mentioned. The one big thing that I think is critically important is for decades we have funded broad-based programs across all of our campuses, and it's critical that Title IX maintain and the opportunities for Title IX still exist. There are many student athletes in a wide variety of sports that work just as hard and strive for the same excellence as the more visible sports like football and basketball. And Title IX is going to be a critical piece of what we do and how we approach this. It's never been a better time to be a college athlete than now. As I mentioned earlier, if you're a full scholarship athlete, you are more advantaged than ever before. These are the most likely athletes to benefit from name, image, and likeness. College sport is not a vocation, and our participants are not employees, and we have to make sure they stay that way and they're not employees. More than 95% of college athletes will not compete at the higher level or organized sports beyond their 4 years of college participation. Their active sports careers will be over, but their education they earn, their lifetime and friendships they gained, and the experiences they will treasure will be provided for years to come. The world of college athletics is changing rapidly. And while we've made changes to benefit our athletes, we must continue to look at more of these opportunities to enhance our experience. And House Bill 2264 will certainly do that. Thank you for the opportunity this morning. Again, I'm sorry I could not be there in person, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I do know that Sue Patterson is here. If she gets in person, we could get some questions from her if we have any. Are there any questions? Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Not, thank you very much. In your packet, committee, we also have a written only from Allison Garrett, president of Emporia State University. Please review that. And if there are any questions or comments? If not, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2264. And thank you all for showing up this morning. We appreciate it. Committee's closed.